Hello, I'm Adam.
And I'm Adrian.
Welcome to Cast from the Crypt. So today we're talking about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. It is an Iranian American film directed by Lily Amirpour. And it's one I'd been hearing a lot about for a long time, and I'd been meaning to watch it for like the past, I don't know how many years. And just now I'm finally getting around to it. I watched it with my brother, who also had heard about it and wanted to see it. And I think same story for you too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've been hearing about this movie since it came out, basically, and it has been highly recommended to me. So I was excited to finally get to see it. I did not watch it with my brother, however, or your brother.
Well, uh, yeah, this movie, I didn't know what to expect going into this, but whatever I could have expected was not this.
Yeah, I thought I knew exactly what to expect. Um, I really actually thought I knew what this movie was about.
Okay,
Um,
what was your impression going into it? What did you think it would be about?
I thought it was a vampire movie that flipped the dynamic, right? Uh, Instead of a girl getting followed at night in the horror movie, she is following maybe some evil man around, or evil men, I suppose, during the runtime of this film. She sucks their blood. Vampire horror movie. That's what I thought this was.
Okay.
And it is that for like maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, you had a better idea of it than I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, but that's so not what this movie is, really. Which I don't know, which was both shocking and not shocking to me. The minute I saw it was black and white, I knew I was in for something altogether different.
Yeah, something less
I,
straightforward, maybe.
yeah, I knew it was going to be artsy fartsy at that point.
It very much is, I guess. It's a really unique film. Like, just the context of its being made. No film before or after will ever probably be like this. It was made by Lily Amirpour, of course. She's an Iranian American woman who crowdfunded this movie after making a short film with the same title. The short film was very successful, and so she was able to raise the money on an Indiegogo campaign, $55,000, and that's how much money this movie cost to make, which is pennies, isn't it? Really, especially in
Yeah,
2014, that's nothing.
yeah. That's I had no idea it was that low. I tried to find the budget. I didn't look too hard, of course.
Yeah.
I figured this was low budget, but wow, that makes me appreciate this movie a little more than I was ready to.
Well, I'm so impressed because watching this movie, you wouldn't know
Yeah,
that. It seems like the production
no,
value is on par with any other film that you've seen. Maybe there's not many like crazy sets or costumes or anything that require that much money. You know, the story itself, you can kind of tell it without spending a bunch of money. But I would not have guessed it had B movie funding.
right.
'Tis the nature of the indie beast.
It is. Tis, I should say. No, I was aware of the Indiegogo campaign. I knew it came from a this project stemmed from a short film, and I know it made quite the splash at the Sundance Film Festival in 2014. Most people, I think, I speak for most people, were able to see this movie in the States on like streaming services and such in 2015. And um, I mean, it is interesting because I have heard so much about this movie since it came out, and it's kind of cool to know that it has such humble origins. I will say they were able to score Elijah Wood as a producer,
I saw that too. I was just about to mention it.
which he must have really enjoyed maybe the first film, or I don't know how he got involved, but Cool.
He's sinking into a lot of indie movies, though. That seems his forte nowadays. But
Really?
yeah, well, he did Mandy too. He produced, didn't he?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Well, this movie occupies a very unprecedented cultural space, I'll say, because it takes place in Iran. It's made by an Iranian American director. The cast is Iranian. It's telling this Iranian story, but it's a story that very much would never be made in Iran because it would have been censored. It would have been hard to get permits. It just would have been impossible to film there, really. It was filmed in California because of all these problems. So it's a very unique story, and it's pretty angsty. I don't know if you noticed that, but there's a lot of like feminist undertones, sexual undertones, just stuff like that I don't think you'd ever see in typical Iranian media.
So I found out after watching the movie that they filmed it in California, though I had figured as such for similar reasons. I knew that this kind of movie would have never been able to be made in Iran. What I really respect is that you have majority of these actors are Iranian American, many of them being born in America. Uh, I love the choice to not just have, Iranian American actors on screen, but to actually have them speaking Arabic. Uh, I thought that was really, really neat. And for me, the world of the film works. I pretty much immediately understood what they were going for. Open, desolate streets. Really, really, one of the first things we see is a desert type landscape and a pile of bodies in a ravine. Uh, so I knew they were going for like that sort of abandoned ghost town feel. And sure enough, when reading more about this project later, Amirpour, how do you say her name?
Amirpour?
Amirpour, that's probably right.
I mean,
Amirpour, the director, talked about how inspired this was by spaghetti westerns and movies that feature those kind of anti-hero rugged characters. So I bought in early on when watching this movie.
yeah. The title has connotations. A girl walks home alone at night. It has connotations of like she will be in trouble. It's kind of spooky. What could happen? She being the subject, you think like something might happen to her. It doesn't feel very safe, especially in, like you said, such a desolate kind of slum city like this. There's seemingly no like structured society there. Like we see zero police, we see zero just government at all. We don't see very much. Pretty much the only thing we see is people impoverished or people dealing with illicit activities. We see prostitutes, we see gang members, we see drug addicts. This is not a good, safe environment that the movie sets up. And then, the implication of a girl walking home alone at night through such a place. It's kind of, you're worried for her, but you watch the movie and you find out the main character is not a girl. It's a guy who falls in love with a girl. And the girl is, of course, the monster, is the vampire, is the thing we're supposed to be afraid of. And in many ways, this is this classic vampire love story. Twilight, Dracula, like every vampire that has romantic aspects to their character, or these sexual aspects to their character, it's always like some girl falls in love with this man. But here it's the opposite. The boy falls in love with the vampire girl. So like in what is such a almost oversaturated genre, now that I'm thinking about it, after watching this movie, there's never any girl vampires. It's always some girl falls in love with the vampire dude. And so what feels like a very simple change, now it's the gender role is reversed like that has changed it dramatically.
Yeah, there's also, it's interesting to note that there aren't really any women in this movie that are afraid at any point. There is that one character, I will not remember her name, unfortunately, but she is being mistreated. She is a prostitute, a sex worker, and the guy that is, taking the money from her, making her work on the streets. His name was Saeed, was it?
I'm not sure. It was the this
Yeah,
drug dealing kind of gang member.
pimp guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and he looks ridiculous.
He's
He's
got
got
face
this
tattoos.
ridiculous
Yeah.
outfit, fake facial hair, like pasted on, face tattoos, a tattoo on the neck that just says sex.
Yeah.
And I do think that's intentional, right? But there is a scene in which he is kind of battering the prostitute that works for him. But other than that scene, there are no women in this movie that are really afraid, right? There's no scream queen. There's no final girl in the classic horror sense. There is just this one character credited as the girl, and she is stalking these streets, seemingly never afraid. She doesn't have anything to be afraid of. In
Yeah.
fact, all the men in the movie at one point or another are afraid of her. And you're right. Like it is so simple on paper, but it also makes for such a unique viewing experience. I can't name another movie that does anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, and on top of that, like that's tip of the iceberg. On top of that, there's so many layers to this movie that make it so unique. But even that scene where the prostitute character is being harassed by this pimp, she isn't screaming. She's not as victimized as maybe another horror movie would have made her. At the end of that scene, he pushes her out of his car and drives away, and she just gets up and kind of brushes herself on and continues on. She is this prostitute character, but in every scene she's in, she sort of holds herself in a very dignified manner. She's older. We find out she's in her 30s, which the pimp character seems to act like that makes her really old to be a prostitute. But I don't, I don't think so. But maybe that's how it is in Bad City, which is the name of this fictitious place.
Which, how on the nose is that?
I know. Well, it's pulpy, just like this movie. Well, even this prostitute character is sort of like not what you would expect from a typical Hollywood prostitute.
In what way?
Well, like she's dignified. She's never degraded, despite the fact that this is such a, it's illegal prostitution. It's never depicted as glamorous or as dignified as this character. Her presentation is very dignified and appropriate, despite the fact that she is a prostitute and carries all the negative cultural connotations you might associate with that.
Yeah. And there is that character, Hossein, who is the father of our main male character, Arash. He, begs that character for her services. And he really just wants her, well, until he doesn't. But, there are several times where he is, truly groveling after her. And he never has enough money because he's a heroin addict. And he's constantly on benders, and he's always struggling financially. And he actually owes that pimp character a considerable amount of money in the beginning of the movie. But you're right. There is a respect towards her that isn't often seen in other movies either. Again, just another way that this movie switches it up on us. Yeah. There are a lot of things about this movie that I think it does really well, and I think it really makes you think. I mean, it does, right? That being said, I do have some issues with it that I guess we can get into later.
Well, I mean, okay. I'll describe some more of the movies, and then we can get into those criticisms. This movie is, maybe more so than it first seems, it's a lot pulpier. it's kind of that Hollywood cinema. Like you said, there's those spaghetti western influences, and that's always going to be very over dramatic, boom, literal western glamour. But stuff in like the name of it is Bad City. Like, okay, it's on the nose. It's pulpy. It has the melodramatic, somber tone of like a noir film. It's in black and white like a noir film too. And then also has elements of like scary vampire movies or classic vampire movies even.
I felt that it was, for me, it felt a lot like Sin City in a way.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I, come clean, have never seen Sin City, but I kept thinking this is like...
It felt like Sin City to me. Also, the fact that it's called Bad City.
I guess, yeah.
I do feel that that's a very clear homage. I could be wrong. This director could have never seen Sin City, but it did feel stylistically very derivative of it. I don't think that the black and white was a bad choice. I liked it.
I liked it a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it worked. I've seen reviews in the last 24 hours that kind of give the movie a harder time because of the black and white, and I don't quite understand it. I really don't think it detracts from the movie whatsoever, or the storytelling, and I think it makes it more visually interesting. So
yeah, well, I'm one who's very critical of making things black and white, because if it's unnecessary, then it's a pretty dramatic thing to do needlessly. But I think it works a lot in this movie. It adds to that somber feeling, that kind of loneliness that you feel throughout the movie. And it also, makes it feel darker and a little more ominous and a little scarier, because it is, it's a vampire movie. It should be a little... there should be a sense of danger, How old is the vampire genre? It's maybe the oldest genre in horror, at least in horror cinema. And so it feels like it's more appropriate for a vampire movie to be in black and white. That's just me.
Yeah, I feel that way too. And I also think, right, considering all the influences here, the old school spaghetti westerns, maybe Sin City, right? I feel that she does a really good job wearing them on her sleeve, and I think that the black and white only enhances the power of her homage, right? I also, and I started to say this a little bit earlier, but I also really do enjoy the locations, the filming locations in this movie. As you said, they shot in California, and I'm pretty sure this has to be a very small podunky town, but so much of the imagery, the vast deserts, what do we call it, oil thingies, the oil the things that go up and down,
the oil derricks, yeah.
All of that imagery is so familiar to so many different parts of the world. It's really, really smart that they were able to make this random area of California feel like a desert ghost town in Iran. And yet also it felt like West Texas. It felt like so many different locations. And so even though the movie is set in Iran, somewhere I've never been, the story didn't feel so far away. I don't know if that makes sense. It just felt familiar. I don't know. That was something that I had in my mind the entire time I was watching the movie.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah.
They all felt like locations that are right across the street or very accessible.
So like every city has some part of the city that's kind of run down, kind of derelict, and completely survives on industry alone. The only legal business we see happening in this movie is a power plant and these oil derricks. So it feels like it could be anywhere that there's a blue-collar slum, I guess.
And it makes you wonder what is going on here, right? In this world in which we have lonely skateboarding vampires and pimps operate with impunity. What is the power structure here? Is this world run by corporations, and so the little guys just don't matter, right? There's no police, there's no check-ins on the operations of the average person. It made me ask a lot of questions about this world. And actually, made me crave more that I never ended up getting. Does that make sense? I wanted a deeper exploration of this world and was instead given I guess a fairly deep exploration of these two young characters. I do think the movie was really ambitious in that it tried to introduce these five central characters and explore them reasonably well, each of them. I do think it falls a little flat there in some of its character work, but I do appreciate the effort, right? But for me, I was so engrossed in this world because again, it felt like it was so familiar, like it was something that exists. And that's my biggest gripe of this movie. I didn't get enough of that world.
I think I can agree with that. I really do love the shots of the scenes of us seeing the industry, the oil work, the power plant. There's a really good scene where the two main characters have a very emotional moment in front of a power plant and a train goes by. And it made me kind of think that, like, there is a bit of a community in this town. Like, there's some characters we see running around and recurring. It's a small city, at least the part that we're seeing of it is small and small enough for characters to run into each other multiple times. But the only work being sort of an industry in refining oil and pumping for oil, it makes it feel so much more isolated because no one within that city might ever even see the product that comes out of these petrol plants and everything, you know. And this power grid sends power to who knows where, but this city is so run down that maybe most of the power does not go to them. Maybe not much of it goes. Like, I fully believe that half the places we see in this city do not have power, yet there's a power plant on the outskirts of town. It feels really like there is simultaneously people being exploited, also high unemployment, no work can be found, there's no money in the city, nothing's being put back into the city, everything's being literally pumped out of the ground and sent somewhere else.
Yeah.
It gives more to that feeling of isolation and loneliness that kind of underpins this whole movie.
Yeah, it just feels desperate. It feels like, honestly, when characters die, it's almost like, well,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like that's so bad, and it kind of makes me. Maybe that's on purpose, but like when she murders, it's almost a gift. Like, I don't know. Clearly, she's an anti-hero, and there's supposed to be some nuance there. But God, existence in this place just seems so bad. Let her eat.
Yeah, I felt the same way. That is why this isn't what I would call a horror movie. It's sort of the themes. It's wearing the clothes of a horror movie, but her, the monster, the vampire woman, she is not scary because she's not killing anyone that feels impactful. It doesn't feel like she's hurting the world around her, even though she is killing these specific people. Like, you don't have any attachment to these people. In fact, half the time you kind of root for her when she kills them. And
Yeah.
it just doesn't feel as malicious. And she is this anti-hero character. She is literally killing people, but yeah, you're not really upset about it, I guess. And that makes it feel more believable as a romance, I guess, because she's not bloodthirsty vampire, you know. She's not the whole Twilight, like, I can't be around you because I'm bad for you. She's more of a human vampire character, I guess. You can relate to her, I guess, a little bit more. And relate to these characters. I guess I would like to talk about her, Miss Vampire.
Yeah, she is fittingly called the girl.
Yeah, I don't think she ever says her name. They never name her. She barely even speaks in this movie. She's very, like, I don't know, maybe that initially makes her sinister, but later on she loses the sinister quality and somehow is silent yet human.
Yeah, she doesn't say much, but she doesn't really need to either. I'm sure you feel similarly. Um, they do a lot with very little dialogue. Actually, I would say they do a lot with very little dialogue between both the father and the son, and the girl and the young man who, again, I believe his name was Arash.
Yes.
Yeah. It really, really works too, because again, the black and white really helps with that desolate, desperate feeling that the movie is oozing, and just the fact that people are so beaten down, they don't say anything. Almost because, well, what is there to talk about? Especially again in that father-son relationship. There's a lot of really great visual storytelling that happens, but I digress.
Yeah, she's pretty conservatively dressed. By the point in the movie where we see her as a vampire killing people, we have seen prostitutes. I believe there is one gender non-conforming character too. By this point in the movie, she's easily, at least outwardly appearing, the most conservative looking of all the female characters. She has a hijab on and a huge black sort of robe or sort of dress that covers her entirely. You can't really see much about her. She seems very unassuming. She's a placid looking girl. But then we very quickly find out that she's the monster. She's the most dangerous character.
Sorry, I just want to add on to that really quick.
Yeah, please.
They do, of course, she doesn't speak a lot. We already spoke to that. But they do a great job of showing us that she's capable of kind of letting go. As you stated, she has this very stoic, very conservative disposition. When she's on the streets and she's stalking folks, she wears that long cape or robe, and says very few words, has this kind of sinister but also mousy facial expression. But at her home, her apartment looks like a average young adult apartment, right? There's posters on the walls, there's a record player, she plays loud music, fun music,
ball too.
right, there's a disco ball. She's got this rather trendy short haircut, and I kind of love the contrast. They do show us a different side of her when she is alone, when she's not taking on this persona as the girl, the one that walks the streets. And so I love that. I thought that was great, and it really added to her characterization. And I applaud the folks that were involved in that for doing it, because in a movie with such little dialogue and with such little character-driven dialogue, that sort of visual storytelling is incredibly important. And I mean, it's necessary, right? It separates a good film from a bad one.
Yeah. Oh, I can't agree with you more. I think that might have been my favorite bit of visual storytelling in this movie. My favorite, you're learning about her character without her talking. I think it was really effective. The plot, I don't think we have to get too much into, because we're talking about the themes.
Yeah, no.
And then the plot is a little surrealist at times and is sort of more about the themes than it is about the things that literally happen. But at this point in the movie, very early on, this drug dealer gang guy sees her in the street and then invites her up to his apartment. She goes with him to the apartment, and he's trying to seduce her. He's offering her drugs. He's doing coke. And as he goes to, seduce her, she puts his finger in his mouth. You think it's the classic vampire, seduction scene. She bites his finger off and then kills him, drinks his blood. But throughout this scene, she remains in this conservative getup. She's not revealing herself to this man, even though they're in the comfort of his own home and no one's looking, and she's literally going to kill him, so literally no one will see. But she's not opening herself up to this character. He's just fodder. He's just who she's going to kill. And later, when she starts to build up a relationship with Arash, I guess I'll say what happens. Arash has dealings with this gang guy because his father is a heroin addict who owes him money. So he stole Arash's car, his precious, it's like a fancy 50s car. So Arash goes to his apartment with some money to get it back. He finds him dead. He finds his keys, and he finds a suitcase full of drugs. So what does Arash do? Kind of the only sensible thing. He takes the drugs, he takes the money, he takes the keys, and he starts selling the drugs. He's the new drug dealer. Because it's kind of worth its weight in gold, and he needs the money, clearly. His father needs the drugs, so might as well. He goes to a party, and while selling ecstasy to some girls at this party, he takes some himself and is completely under the influence, inebriated for the rest of the night. This is where he meets this girl. He sees her in the street. They start talking a little bit, and he falls over on the ground, is like, could not be more defenseless. Clearly was not going to get away. And she's trying to convince him to go back to her place. You can come to my apartment if you want to sit down. He falls over onto the ground, and she says, come on, I'll take you to my home. As the audience, we know she is a vampire. She's taking this defenseless man to the vampire's lair. You're expecting, oh no, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a feeding frenzy. She's going to tear him apart. But when we get to her apartment, it is, like you said, her apartment's sort of a reflection into her character. It's the disco balls, the types of music she plays. We get to see a little bit more of her personality from the visual aspects of how she's decorated her living space. And this is where we finally see her take off the robe and this conservative outfit. And she has this short bobbed haircut that I think there's some really good imagery here that exposes her neck, and this striped shirt that's also sort of like kind of off the shoulder. She turns her back at one point to him in what is like in body language, like a very vulnerable position. So you see that she is not looking to kill him. She is not only motivated by the typical vampire bloodlust, but also she seems to have like emotional motivations. She's not just a vampire. She's also a human character. And you get the feeling that she, I don't know, isn't...
craves human connection.
Yeah, craves human connection in this isolated environment where she's the monster, the other. She's still wanting to connect with another person.
Yeah, and they just kind of hang out there. I mean, she plays him music. She takes out the disco ball. They have a great moment. It's this long, lingering shot of her listening to his heartbeat, her head on his chest. And, we, the viewer, are, of course, left wondering, is she craving his blood right now? Or is she, infatuated with him? Is it a mix of both? It's a really great scene. It's maybe the strongest, in my opinion, the strongest moment in the movie. And you can tell that Arash is, of course, very, very infatuated with her. And there's a mystique to her that's undeniable, right? She does not tell anybody her name. She, other than in this apartment, in this one scene, she has kept her mysterious disposition, right? Her very dry demeanor. And in the very beginning, right, when she is with the very cruel drug dealing character, he sees that she is, of course, very indifferent to his advances, and it makes him be very goofy, very awkward. You know what I'm talking about? he does all these like, he does like a ridiculous dance, and he is biting his lip, and it's very out of character for this otherwise incredibly masculine and just kind of garbage guy. And she wants nothing to do with him. But Arash is, of course, the polar opposite of that character, and shows her compassion and vulnerability, and is so willing to kind of give himself to this process, and to her, that she's incapable of actually finishing the job.
Yeah, and what is like the first interaction her and Arash have? She wants to take him to her place. Why don't you come up to my place? And he doesn't even want to do that. He's high out of his mind, sure, but he wants to just sit and talk in the street. He's not even thinking about anything sexual. This drug dealer guy, the first thing he says to her is, why don't you come up to my place? He's making advances, and he's clearly only thinking about one thing. Arash is friendlier and just more genuine. And maybe that was the initial allure, and maybe that's what saved his life. She seems to only kill people who are aggressive or violent or have somehow hurt women or exploited women in some form or fashion. And her being the monster, her having like the power in these situations, is, yes, very contradictory to like what you maybe would associate women's station would be in Iranian culture, but also in horror, in cinema at large. Like you said earlier, she's not the scream queen, she's the monster. There's just not many female monsters now that you think about it. One thing I do love about their relationship, their love connection, is it isn't this typical, like, the one of the biggest one of the tropiest things about vampire romances is the allure to the vampire. The thing that makes them sexually attractive is that they're dangerous. Like Bella Swan wants to be with Edward that much more because she knows he's a vampire, because she knows he can kill her in an instant and wants to drink her blood. That's like a huge part of the attraction in most vampire romances. But here in this movie, I don't think Arash ever finds out she's a vampire. By the end of the movie, he knows that she's maybe dangerous, but a literal vampire who drinks human blood, I don't think he ever sees her do that or ever finds out. So it removes that aspect, and he's just attracted to her and not the danger. She's not a femme fatale to him.
Yeah.
It makes the romance seem more genuine.
It does. It does. For me, I felt that the origins of the romance were very strong. The foundations of it were very strong. Narratively, I mean, right? Like, I really sort of bought into it at first. There is, of course, some extreme things that happen later on in the film that I found to be far-fetched, right? I found their love continuing on to be far-fetched. But then again, right, this is Bad City, and extreme things happen here, and I don't know, listening to you is making me kind of rethink my initial opinion on the movie.
Glad I can convince you.
And I like this movie, for the record. I bought in so much so early that when it lost me at the end, it really sort of lost me at the end.
Yeah. There's not much of a definitive ending, I guess, and that can kind of be a little frustrating.
Well,
maybe.
Right, and, not to get into too much detail, but we, of course, establish early on that the girl is a vampire and she eats, right? And what you were saying, she seems to mostly attack men that are actively harming women in some shape or form. Hossein, who in the beginning of the movie is depicted as this very helpless, seemingly empathetic character, a character that you, the viewer, empathize with because he has withdrawals using visual storytelling, showing these framed pictures of a wife that has clearly passed. They make you empathize with this man. And there is a pretty awful and brutal scene in which he finally has some money because of his son, and he chooses to spend it on the local prostitute who he was kind of fawning over in the very beginning of the film. And she doesn't want to do heroin with him. She is generally disinterested but wants the money, and he decides in a fit of rage that he's going to tie a belt around her arms and make her do heroin with him. And I don't know how, they don't really clearly establish how the girl senses that the prostitute is in danger. The two do have a connection earlier on in the film, and they have a conversation, or a few actually, throughout the film. But she busts in on them and makes very quick work of Hussein and kills him. And though later on we are led to believe that Arash knows that the girl was involved in his death, directly involved with his death, she murdered him, he kind of forgives it and runs off into the sunset with the girl. And some may love that ending. I found it far-fetched and not as definitive, to use your term, as I would have liked it. But that's, those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that too. It felt kind of like they wanted there to be an open ending, but also like clearly there's like more to the story that happens after this, and the fact that you don't get to see it is like it can be frustrating. My biggest, I guess, criticism, I don't know, about the development of these characters. They focus on Arash and the girl. Of course, it's a romance about them. And they do a very good job of developing their relationship and showing you Arash more directly, like his character, through his dialogue and his interactions with other characters. And I really love the way they show the girl's character, not through any dialogue, but through subtler ways, and kind of, it's very untraditional, and I very much appreciate that. But the other characters, you don't get to learn as much as I would have liked. The father, Hussein, I guess his wife died, but he keeps saying, like, why did you leave me? Maybe she left him. He clearly never got over her death. He thinks that this cat is his wife reincarnate, and somehow he hates the cat for that. So it seems like she didn't just die. There was, like, relationship issues too, maybe, but we don't get to see much outside of that. I on one hand, I kind of like that because, show don't tell. But on the other hand, I would have liked to see more development. I feel like Hussein's character started to get development, and then he got killed, and that was the end of that. Even Arash, like, finds his father's dead body towards the end of the movie, and then is kind of like, well, he's dead. Like, it kind of just ends abruptly. There is this gender non-conforming character, who I slightly mentioned earlier, who, in what I've read about Amirpour, the director, she seems to, like, she says they're a really important character, but I don't know if we even see this person that much. And then it is also kind of like, they're queer. That's not much more than that. It's kind of just there. We don't get enough at all on that character. I'd love to have spent more time.
Right. I read a little bit about her perspective on this character. And I think one of the direct quotes were, they're in the movie because in an Iranian movie or in Iranian society, you can't be gay. It's not okay. And great, right? Like I'm here for the commentary, but there is none. The I guess there could be a grander point made about the character's inclusion being enough, right? And that is exactly the point. The fact that the character is on screen in an Iranian movie, that is the point. But I am not enough of a film snob really to indulge that point. Like, I want it. I want the character. I want the character to be written fully. And that's just not justification for me. I don't know. Maybe that sounds too aggressive.
No, I mean, my criticisms too. In this
Yeah.
movie too has a lot to say. There's a lot of commentary and a lot of well done, well thought out commentary. So I don't think we need, it says enough. And yeah, I just wish it was more. This character was more of a character.
Yeah, it's doing a lot. The movie, I applaud the movie for doing a lot and saying a lot. If you're going to put the character on screen, I want to know the character and understand why we are using this character. But yeah, I'm not going to knock off too much for it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe there was another cut of the movie in which we had more.
For the ending of the movie, I'll just quickly kind of synopsis. After Arash finds his father dead, he goes to the girl's house and begs her to run away with him. They'll just get in his car and drive. Classic romance movie ending. But while they're preparing to go, he sees that she's taken that cat that his dad had, that he thought was his wife. And so this signals to him that she was somehow involved in his death. Of course, he doesn't know she's a vampire and she killed him. But he doesn't confront her about it. He doesn't say anything about it. And as they start to drive away, he stops, gets out of his car, and just kind of paces around in front of the car. He scratches his head. He's clearly distressed and thinking what to do. But he chooses to not bring it up or not look into it. And he gets back in the car and they drive off. It's a unsure ending. It leaves you with kind of not knowing what happens. Maybe just like Arash doesn't know what's going to happen. The ending is frustrating, but maybe it's supposed to be frustrating. Maybe Arash is frustrated and you should sympathize. But it's still frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it left a lot to be desired. And again, the world is so interesting here. The characters that are written are very, very interesting. I like the romantic dynamic, the family dynamic. And the ending for me just felt very half-baked in comparison to the rest of this very polished picture. So it was weird. It was weird. I get it. I'm all for an ending that makes you think and an ending that forces you to really consider the movie that you just watched over the span of a day, 2 days, a week. That's part of the reason I really liked, Jordan Peele's Nope. That's part of the reason I enjoy movies like The Witch or anything that Eggers has done. But for me, what separates this movie and its ending from another really well-made horror movie with a ending that maybe isn't as definitive is that the things that led up to it, right? Her having killed her new boyfriend's father, and there's just zero dialogue about it. Also, there is a whole nother character we haven't even talked about that comes up several times that Arash seems to be interested in early on in the film, and she's at that party later on. I don't really feel the need to discuss her so much, but she is just completely thrown away and forgotten. There's these loose ends, these sloppy bits that, for me, when I'm also given this ending, this very loose ending, I'm just like, I don't think this was intentional. I think this was kind of just sloppiness something that comes with very little studio oversight and a B movie budget.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, any of my criticisms, grain of salt. Like, they pale in comparison to how impressive this movie is and just so much. Like, it really does so much on a nothing budget.
It does.
And, it's entirely this director's vision. And it's very cohesive, considering all of that. Another criticism I might have, though, is it's just kind of weirdly paced. Like, it's pretty slow at times. Slow burner, yeah, but it's not consistently a slow burner. And I guess that's kind of what weirds me out.
Yeah, there's a choice made by, I think it's a choice made by the director, the cinematographer, whoever, where anytime there are two characters alone on screen and they are, closer than 2 feet to each other, did you notice the very long, lingering shots of people almost touching, people looking into each other's eyes, namely the girl and Arash? There are 6 or 7 of these shots. There's a handful in which there are two people saying nothing on screen, having a physical moment for a very long time. And personally, to speak to the pacing, I thought it really slowed the movie down in a negative way. Anytime they did it, I understood what they were going for. Human connection is a weird and foreign thing to the girl because she is this lonely vampire. But I don't know. I thought those lingering moments could have taken half the time and have been just as clear, just as effective. I felt they were ham-fisted and they hurt the pacing. I feel that I liked this movie a little less than you did, but I don't want to give the impression I disliked it. I really do appreciate all the things that it did. I guess it's the few shortcomings that it had kind of just singed me a little bit more.
I guess in like the dumbest way I could describe this movie, it had a very specific mood I enjoyed. And if you're here for that vibe, then you're here for that vibe and you'll enjoy this movie. But it's not one that you throw on. It's one you pay attention to, and you do kind of have to be in the right mood for it. You have to want a movie like this. But I did at the time. That's why I finally watched it, and I very much enjoyed it. It was like pouring with rain too when I watched it, so it was very like
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, good setting. Yeah, I watched it on Tubi. It was on Tubi,
So did I.
so easily accessible. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. That's what I'll say. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I like it. It's worth the watch. And yes, very, very impressive given the budget. I'm glad I finally got to watch it.
Yeah. And incredibly unique too. There's not a movie like this anywhere else. But yeah, that's it for me. So thank you for joining me, Adrian.
Thank you, buddy.
And thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.